Hello, folks. Welcome to the HireMyVA Team and Business Building Podcast, brought to you by ugozi.com. And in this podcast and in HireMyVA, we help you to reclaim your freedom through hiring and thriving with virtual assistants without breaking the bank. That means your bank. And I'm Dave Braun, and I'm here with my partner, fantastic mentor, coach, but most importantly, my very, very good friend, Larry Broughton. Larry.
Hello, handsome David.
What's up, my friend?
I'm looking forward to seeing you tonight and seeing our buddies on our weekly Wednesday get together.
Yeah. And I think and it's my turn to lead, and I've got a couple of awesome words for us to discuss.
You scare me sometimes when you get so excited about this.
Yeah.
Good. Well, it's good to see you. Thank you for being in my life, Dave. Thanks for keeping me on track. And, the encouragement that I get from you, is fuel that I need. So thank you. Love you.
Oh, yeah. And, today so folks, before we get on these meetings, we talk about our businesses and the stuff we do together and not do together, review them, encourage each other, and talk about our own little problems. And it's like, I was so kind of like down before we started talking. And an hour ago, I was kind of down, and now I feel like much, much better.
Good.
So thank you, Larry, for that. Thank you for the advice and thoughts.
Of course.
Whether or not I take them, that's another question.
Well, I will remind you of that. I'll play this back. You did thank me, you did feel better.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. Okay. So the question and the topic we want to talk about is, how do I get an employee to follow instructions? In other words, how do I get my team members to follow a standard operating procedure?
I'm laughing because it was reminiscent. Well, if you're a parent, you might struggle with the same thing, right? I mean, have you ever had a child and you say, "Dude, you need to clean your room," and they go and clean it every single time from then on, right? And you never have to do it again, right?
No, never. No, stays clean forever. Yeah.
So this is an interesting one. First of all, whenever I get the chance, I'm going to be an evangelist about a couple of words. And the one here is the word employee. Mm-hmm. Okay. If you call your employees, if you treat them like employees, they will show up like employees.
Right.
Now, I'm not a big fan either of the other extreme where people call them family members, because they're not family members either. True. They're team members. They're on your team.
Yeah.
Right. And my feeling, Dave, is, because I tend to be an evangelist about this all the time. So if you give me opportunity, I'm going to talk about it. Everyone wants to be on a winning team. Mm-hmm. Right. And the great thing, I think, particularly to this question, Dave, is that we all know that together we have a mission. Let's say you're on a sports team, and it's to win the game. Mm-hmm. But a quarterback is not going to be a linebacker, right? A point guard is not going to be a center, right? You've all got specific roles and tasks to do, but it fits into a larger framework. I think that's one of the keys that we need to make sure that our team members understand is, what does their function do to fit into the overall framework to win the game, to complete the mission?
Yeah.
I was having a conversation. I'm sorry, give me 1 second.
Go for it.
Before I lose this. I was having a conversation with one of our general managers and our ops guy this morning that, just so you know, this guy is a guest service host, one of the team members we were talking about. And I don't think he'll ever see this, so I'll just say, he thought that that the people who do the breakfast setup, that would be much more efficient for them if they didn't have doors on all of the cabinets in the kitchen. And so he took it upon himself to remove the doors on the cabinets, because why open the cabinet when you can just look and see, okay, here's what the inventory items are. Okay, makes some logical sense, right? But what happens when you just take the initiative to do something that's outside of your realm of responsibility without informing your other team members? You're just the quarterback calls a play. You think, well, maybe a better play will be this, but you don't notify anyone else on the team.
Yeah.
What I tried to get folks to recognize is that I love the initiative that this team member took, for sure. I love the creativity that he has. I love the problem solving, but that's like going into someone else's home and taking the doors off the cabinets without telling them you're going to do that. Now you've got somebody that's in a defensive posture, right?
Right.
So where did all this come down to? Well, communication. I think this is one of the things. This is how you get team members to follow instructions. Part of it is communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you may have standard operating procedures already set up, but I think even before you hire someone, and this is going to sound like a broken record to some of you, we need to do personality assessments to find out, is this someone who can even follow a standard operating procedure? How shocking is that, right? Because this is why you do position profiles. This is why you do job descriptions, and they should see them during the interview process so that they know what's expected of them. And then you do personality assessments to make sure that they can follow standard operating procedures. Because let's be honest, before we dive much deeper into this, Dave, there are some jobs for sure that you must follow standard operating procedures or it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? There are other jobs where you don't need standard operating procedures. You just need results. I'm thinking creative types. How you get there, it doesn't matter, right? As long as the results, meet or exceed your expectations. But for someone like me, if someone hired me with the expectation that I was going to follow standard operating procedures, it would be an absolute crap show. Because the way I'm built is a 9 quick start on the Colby A index that measures my cognitive brain, how my brain works. And this is something we struggle with in our organizations, and even with you and I, is that we may have amazing standard operating procedures, Dave, but if you have somebody who's an initiating quick start, they don't even follow standard operating procedures. For virtually everything in our organization, there's a standard operating procedure. And except for the basic ones, it's very hard for me to follow them because my brain doesn't work that way. But someone who is a high fact finder, they live and die by standard operating procedures. Not only do they like creating them, but they like following them. So I guess before I stop pontificating here, I'll just say this. We need to ask ourselves, is this a task? Is this a position that requires standing operating procedures? And if so, to what degree?
Good point.
So as far as following instructions, I think between position profiles, job descriptions, those types of things, understanding what their role is on the team, those are some of the things. But I'm sorry, I did not have the intention of pontificating for that long, but put a microphone in front of me, Dave. I'll talk.
No. That's great. That's why we do this, right? This is our podcast, Larry. We do what we want.
That's right. All right. So let's go back and forth. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first off is we did an episode 137 that talked about what are the team member roles, and defining them and having people follow them and the consequences of not doing that, right? And your example that you talked about earlier was, quarterback or running back or, on a team not doing their particular roles, and it could be a disaster for the organization, right? So folks, I wish you would go back and listen to that if you haven't after you're done with this. But yeah, one of the things that came to mind as you were talking, Larry, is there's a particular question that I have when I interview folks, and I ask them this for everything, and it leads to it's like an integrity thing for me.
Yeah.
When I ask them, so I'm like, the question I ask is, say I hire you, and I say, we gotta follow this particular procedure. Here's the standard operating procedure. Here's the process that we set up. You've got to follow this as part of your job. You got to do that. And then, okay, you agree to that and everything. But then a month later, I come in and say, hey, there's an emergency. There's something going on. We just have to skip following this procedure and just get this done. How are you going to respond to me? Right. And so sometimes the response is, well, I'll just do what you say. I don't like that response.
Because you're built like this, but go ahead. Why?
Yeah,
Why don't
for
you
that,
like that response?
The response that I like is that, okay, I understand that, but I would remind you that we have this procedure here for a reason, and maybe there's a certain things that we could skip this time, but we've got it there for a reason. And I'm worried, Mr. Manager or Mr. Owner, that in the long term, it's going to hurt our company.
Mhm.
So maybe there's a couple of things that we could potentially skip, but let's work together and see what is the impact
Mhm.
of those, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really good as long as there's communication about it as well, right?
Yeah.
Oftentimes, standard operating procedures are set up to protect against the downside, and assuming that you're protecting the weak link in the chain, right?
Yeah,
Um, so we need to review them from time to time, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Because standard operating procedures are set up for today's environment and circumstance, hoping to predict what the future might be. But as things change, as the organization change, we need to update our standard operating procedures. Does this still make sense?
Right.
Right. And so what I like is when team members actually like, and oftentimes it's the new ones, right? Because they come in with a fresh set of eyes. I encourage them, hey, as you're reading through these standard operating procedures, if they don't make sense to you, if someone brand new to the organization, raise your hand and ask why. Why do we do this? Because you may not see why we do this, but there might actually be a reason for it. You may
Yep.
not see why we do it, but it might be something that we used to do that we don't need to do anymore. So this is an opportunity for us to update them. But here's the thing, it takes courage for manager and leader to do that, because we have this, I don't know, either defense mechanism or been brainwashed that as a manager or a leader, we need to be right about everything. We need to have everything perfect. And our team members are just going to come in and follow what you say. That is not the long-term recipe for success, right? The long-term recipe for success is encouraging them to help improve the process and
That's
improve the end results. And frankly, your team members will feel more invested. They'll feel more empowered. They'll take more pride in their work. They'll feel like they're part of the team. Why are you laughing at that?
No, because you're absolutely right. I just had something today that happened with, Brian on our team.
What's that?
And we have a particular operating procedure about updating a certain site and how we maintain it. And he's like, the way we're doing it is just taking us way too long. I think we ought to revisit it. And it's like,
Good.
Okay, I think you're right. And here's where I think it makes sense to do that and where not to. Right. And so there's a discussion. That's exactly right. It's a discussion. And I think one of the things you hit on was really key. And this is what we have in our SOP template that we encourage people to have as part of the victory program.
That's
Folks,
right.
you got to do that. If you ever hear about it, ask
right.
us about it when we're going to run it.
Yeah.
But
right.
part of that template is at the very, very beginning, we say, why?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. What's the purpose? What's the result from this? And so that goes a long way in helping people understand that they've got to understand, or they've got to follow the procedure.
Yeah, but having the procedures, but not allowing your team members to have access to these SOPs is also a problem.
Yeah.
Right?
That's one of the first things you got to do.
In the old days when I was, working at McDonald's, there was a binder. There was the blue binder.
Yeah.
They had all the standard operating procedures in them. So no matter what it was, there was something written out. And in many ways, there were beta or VHS tapes that showed you how to do things, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays, we have things like Google Drive and all kinds of things. So you can set up a whole library for your team members to go to if they have a question about closing out, an invoice or reconciling a bank statement or whatever it is. You could put categories, whether it's operations or marketing or accounting or whatever, right?
Right.
But they need to know where they are and they have to have access to them. That's really important as well.
Yeah. And I think another thing related to that is helping them be able to navigate through them, because if they have that question about how do you close out, the evening or lock the doors or whatever, it's got to be easily findable for them, because you're going to have, like you said, the big blue book. Well, that's the nice thing about that is that, hey, it's on the shelf. I can pull it out, look in the index and find it. Sometimes in our electronic world, we have so much stuff, it can be hard to find and then to navigate through it. Yeah. Right. So it's important that it's in a structured way so that they can find what they're looking for.
Yeah. You just have to find out what works best for you and your team at the time, because, you may have rockstar team members that like it one way now, but later on, the new team members might prefer it another way. Again, it's the whole communication thing. We really need to go back and forth on the communication with our team members about this kind of stuff. And I would throw in there as well is that we have project management tools in our organizations. And I would make sure that when possible, there's some kind of connectivity, whether it's electronic or whatever, between the two, so that things get updated.
Right.
But whether it's to-dos or whatever, you may have in your SOP, hey, when using Slack, which is a project management function or a communication tool, if you stop using Slack a year from now, you better update your SOPs. Yeah. That would be a good thing to do, right? This is not one of those things, Dave, where you can set it and forget it, as Ron Popeil used to talk about.
Yes.
You can't set it and forget. These are living documents. Okay. So in order, like when we have run franchised hotels, when I've worked in franchised restaurants, from time to time, you had to do continuing education credits. You had to go back and retest and reassociate, or not reassociate. What's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, you had to go back and review stuff that you had already learned through SOPs before, and initial it, sign off on it, take a quiz or whatever it is. These are things that you can easily incorporate into your organization to assure that people are up to date on SOPs.
Yeah. Those are great ideas.
Yeah.
And, the other thing that I think is fundamental to them is going to be, you when the occasion warrants it. There you talked about being a 9 on a quick start, but when the occasion warrants it, you as a leader have got to, follow them to a certain extent.
Oh yeah. Right? Yeah. So listen, if I walk into a hotel and they're slammed at the guest reception, I know enough, I can jump in and I know that how to do the greeting. There are basic standard operating procedures. I know about the privacy and security. I know how to make sure that they get a card key. I know the steps that need to be taken, but I can't do that day in and day out. My brain doesn't work that way. I can do it for short sprints, right? So my point is, if you hire someone, if you have a role that needs to be someone who definitely follows SOPs, you just need to be very careful about who you put into that position. Most people can do it for a short period of time, but day in, day out, like I would get burned out.
Yeah. Good point. Great point.
That's all.
One of the things that I want to go back to is when we talked about putting the why in front of the SOP. I think that is such a critical step. And the reason why you want a why, is because if you as a leader or whoever's writing it can't articulate the why and do it to where people can understand it, then why the heck are you doing it in the first place? Yeah. So that's a very, very, very critical piece.
Well, it's not just the why of the SOP, but how does that fit into, again, our job? Let's see, if you're on a sports team, for instance, oftentimes it is not your job to win that match or to win that game. Your job is to win the championship, right? It's the long haul. Now, many organizations, you need to get a bunch of, you might have to go into undefeated, but if you look at a baseball team, for instance, no one goes undefeated in baseball. You lose a lot. You lose a lot every time you step up to the plate, right? Most people strike out, never make it to first base, right? You lose a lot of games throughout the season, right? But they know that the job is to win the pennant and win, get to the World Series. That's really the end goal here.
Yes.
Right. So they not only need to understand, here's why this SOP is going to help me complete this task, but this task is then going to help me do my job better, and my overall performance is going to help us do whatever the goal is of your organization.
Yeah.
Why your mission is so important. They need to understand, ultimately, if I don't do this, for instance, if I have a guest who walks into the hotel and I'm rude to them and I don't take a credit card from them upon check-in, right? And I don't double check to make sure that the room is clean, I'm still going to get paid for this hour that I'm working, right?
Right.
But it's not going to help me help the manager, the leader, the owners, the management company win the championship, which is getting the guest to come back to write a positive review online and actually put money into the bank so that I can pay payroll. It all fits together.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
It's like building blocks.
Yeah. Understanding your part in the entire, vision and mission of your company, right?
Yeah. So I think what we need to do is you need to check up on this from time to time, probably informally during each of your team meetings. Like a lot of organizations will have monthly team meetings, and you can bring up certain SOPs. Hey, we're doing really well in this area, just informally. We're doing not so good in this area, so let's tweak that a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can do quarterly trainings. You can do, twice annual reviews, whatever it is, but it's got to be institutionalized. This kind of stuff, Dave, needs to become part of your institutional DNA. And the message I would say is, we're doing this because perfection is evasive. We will never be perfect, but excellence is the standard. We will achieve excellence if we follow these SOPs and we communicate effectively. And we've got everybody sitting on the right seat on the bus, as Jim Collins likes to say.
Yeah.
Right. But again, communication.
Yeah. Now, Larry, we've got, we talked about setting them up and the whys and communicating and all that stuff. But what happens? What do you do when, you've got this SOP and you've got it in place and you think it's great? You've explained the whys and it's a critical part of the business. And then you find out that somebody is not following them. And you will find out because there will be a consequence at some point. Like one of the examples of, like for us, we've got certain a process when we do web maintenance, bringing and securing sites and all that stuff, right? And we've had some times where somebody has not followed the procedure and it's led to some pretty disastrous consequences for clients.
Yeah.
All right, so what do you do at that point?
I just make sure and say this to them: the beatings will continue until morale improves. Sorry. Well, I guess it depends on the team member and what the phase is that they're in during the company. So if it's someone who's brand new to the industry or to your organization, there's a training period, and there should be some peer-to-peer mentoring going on. Mm-hmm. They should be shadowing someone, right? And just like any new person doing anything new, there will be mistakes, right? But there needs to be some victories along the way as well. Tons of studies have shown, not only in the human arena, but in the, in psychology, where they study bonobos and chimps and mice, is that if they are slapped down every time they make a mistake, they just stop doing. And it's the same thing in the human kingdom, right? So we have to allow people to make mistakes, but it's how do we respond to those mistakes that's really key. Do we turn it into a learning opportunity, or does it become punitive? Now, if I'm trying to come up with a quick life safety example, right? If it's someone, let's say that it's a guest service host at a hotel, and it's their very first day, and worst case scenario, the fire alarm goes off, there's a fire, and they don't know what to do, I'm not going to terminate them because they just started.
Right.
But if it's a manager who's been there for a long time, they've gone through the training, and they don't know what to do, we're going to have a different conversation, right? So the first few times are mistakes. If they continue to make the same mistake over and over again, I've got to be reflective as the manager. Let's say that they report to me. What have I done that's leading to this? Has my training been effective? Have I been communicating effectively on what's expected? What are the last conversations I've had with them about this? And if I can say, hey, I've done the best that I can, then, they're saying that the first time's a mistake, the next time is a coincidence. It's another, you got to start ratcheting it up. If I've done everything that I can to make sure that they've been trained, they've gone through the training process, they've passed the quizzes that they need to pass, whatever it is, the first couple of conversations are going to be reminders for me. I would say the second conversation is going to be, hey, dude, listen, you've done this, and this is kind of a silly thing, but I'm going to be really direct with you for a second. Dave, this would be a silly reason for you to get written up. Let's not do that. Okay. Because that's the first step to actually losing your job. Okay. And I don't want that to happen. Right. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. Right. So I'd set the expectation is that excellence is our standard. And if we keep making these types of mistakes or falling short here, that's not going to help us reach our standard of excellence. Right. But once they keep doing this 3, 4, 5 times, that's a pattern. And either that's malicious, right? Or it's, what else could it be? It could be incompetence, right? Either way, that's not a good thing, right? Yeah. And so at that point, you got to ratchet it up from there. Then you do formal coaching, coach them up or coach them out of the organization. And again, you're going to treat somebody differently who's been with you for 5 years versus someone who's been with you 60 days.
Yeah.
Right. So if somebody's been with you for 5 years and up to this point, there's not been any problems, you need to start asking yourself, okay, what's changed in their life or in the organization that's causing this to happen?
Yeah.
So I guess my point in all this, Dave, is we need to be human, as well. Again, it goes back to communication. How do I find this out? Because I've seen so many of these managers, and I'm on so many online forums, management and leadership forums online. And I hear these managers talking about their team members, like calling them idiots and how anything gets done. I have no idea. And I was like, damn, I would never want to work for you. Yeah. Because sometimes I go on to look at these forums because I want to see what are people doing right and what are they doing wrong. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to work for you either. So guess what? I'm not going to do that. I hope that makes a little bit of sense.
Oh, it does.
So I think you got to get to a point, Dave, where you set your expectations. If they're not meeting the expectations, you coach them up or coach them out. I don't want to get into a whole, progressive disciplinary thing on this conversation, but I would just say generally that's the approach I would take.
Yeah, that makes total sense. In fact, I had to do that recently with a team member who, wow, it was multiple times, and they couldn't follow and were making some really fundamental mistakes, and it was like, I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, I think this, our organization is just probably not the right place for you at this point.
There you go.
So we had to do that. And it was tough, but the good thing about it was Larry, is as what we talked about before, we need to do an episode on terminating or freeing somebody. I don't know if we've done one yet. But one of the good things about that is when we were having the conversation, the person said, I kind of felt like this was coming.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing, right? I'm glad that has sunk in, Dave. Yeah, I'm a big believer in setting them free.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be on a winning team. Everyone wants to feel good about themselves, right? I mean, crying out loud, we know this through the State of the American Workforce survey that's done constantly. They want to feel good about their own performance. And if you're being direct and honest, they're going to know that they're not performing. And if you've coached them up over and over again, then clearly it's just not a good fit. And so you encourage them to go find a place that's a better fit for them. I've had, like, whenever we do a termination, we have a witness in there, and I've had to, frankly, part ways with.
When you're doing it in person.
When you're doing it in person, yes. For a couple of reasons. One is it's nice to have a witness, right? But number two, it's just for the moral support for both the person who's the leader who's letting someone go and the other person, right? Because sometimes I've seen them go off the effing rails, where it turns violent, right? But I can't think of a time where I've ever terminated someone and they didn't know what was coming.
Yeah.
I think because you take them on the journey. And even if it was somebody who had great performance today, but they're being terminated tomorrow because it's like an ethical thing, they probably knew it was coming.
Yeah.
If they slugged a client, punched them in the throat, or they stole from me, because we talk about this cultural stuff, it's still not a whatever you call it, a surprise. Our CFO used to have his office right next door to mine. And so there were a couple of times if I was the only person in the organization who could terminate executives, VP level and up.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were a couple of times where I had to do coaching sessions with a fellow executive. And so I bring our CFO in. And there was a time where I was actually letting go one of our VPs because we went through everything that we talked about today. We went through the whole process, but it still wasn't working. And so the CFO was very nervous about this particular one. And he told me that I'm like really nervous about how this is going to go. I said, got this. You just need to sit here, right? So when the termination was completed, the guy that we were letting go gave me a hug on the way out the door, right? Because he recognized too that he was going to do better somewhere else. Right? And he did. He did. He called me and said, "Hey, what do you think I ought to be doing with this organization? Or do you know somebody that might be a better fit?" Gave him a couple of recommendations. He got hired at one of these places. I knew the owner of that company, and he was there for like 4 years before he moved on to the next place. So we got to think about this. We're setting them free, Dave, and you're freeing your own emotional baggage just wrapped up in this damn thing.
That's right.
We were talking earlier today. You've got to feel good about your business. When you start hating your business or your role in the business, change needs to be made.
Yes.
Right. And if you're constantly putting out fires around the performance of a particular person, change needs to be made. Right. Because every minute you spend supervising or micromanaging someone because they can't or won't follow instructions is a minute that you could be doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone around them is watching. That's the thing that we forget sometimes.
Right.
If you keep low performers in your team, Dave, your high performers will leave.
Yeah. Or they will get demotivated.
They will get demotivated. Yeah, but the high performers
then they'll eventually
usually leave because they're like,
they'll
say it again, people want to be on a winning team.
Yeah.
Okay. I love your idea that we should do it on actual getting deep on the termination process and maybe sharing some stories. On it.
That'll probably be a multi-part episode for sure.
Yeah. But I think we might, as we start to wrap this thing up, I think the best organizations, Dave, and I go back to my days at McDonald's, we had to do periodic audits of every SOP.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a date on there. So they say this SOP and down at the bottom created on this date. Right. And so some will need to be audited more frequently than others, like life safety issues. Those should be reviewed at least annually.
Sure.
If you're in a brick and mortar building, what's the exit strategy? What do I do if there's a fire? What do I do if there's a death in my business?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Right. So you're going to have to be the one to determine how frequently things need to be updated. If you are implementing a new system, new procedure, setting up a new department, those SOPs need to be reviewed more frequently than a more mature system because things change.
So let's give everybody an action item right now.
Okay.
An action item is we'll give you two choices, either quarterly or every 6 months. Put something in your calendar that says, I'm going to do a review of our SOPs. At least do that and get started. And then at that point, you can choose if you want to do the most critical ones, if you want to do an older one, if you want to just review the structure, just maybe have a half a day meeting or a couple of hour meeting with your team, do something, but schedule something in your calendar today that you're going to go and do that.
Okay. I keep going back to the McDonald's thing, but this is just something as an example. We used to get basically informal one-page monthly QSC reports, quality service and cleanliness reports. Somebody would come in, act like they're a guest, order their burger, how many minutes did they stand in line, how quickly did it take to get the food, how long did it take them to get their food, what's the quality of it, walk the property. They're doing it from a guest perspective, right?
Yeah.
Quarterly, there are more in-depth ones. And then annually, there were like deep dives where like a whole team would come into the business and check, are all these SOPs being utilized? And oh, by the way, you said that you were, again, staying with McDonald's, you said you were doing quarterly checkups on your ice cream machine that always breaks down. Show me the maintenance records of it. Like, they go deep on this. And so what you can't do on that process is wait to the 30 days before the end of the year to get all this stuff done. And so you have to plan ahead. So if you choose quarterly or every 6 months, I would recommend that you not do all of them quarterly, but you pick this function. I'm going to go through all of my operating SOPs at the end of the first quarter. I'm going to go through all my sales and marketing SOPs.
That's a great idea.
Second quarter. I'm going to go through all my whatever it is, so that everything is getting a review every 12 months. Instead of doing, I'm going to do all my SOPs in 1 month. That's just overwhelming.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So really what you're saying is set a calendar for every quarter and pick a category of your business.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's one way to do it.
Yeah. And try it. Everybody try it.
Well, then it becomes part of your DNA. If you say, I'm going to do it once a year, what happens when you say, hey, I'm going to do it in June, and then June gets super busy?
Yeah. You're going to say, well,
I'm going to kick the can down the road. Right. But if it's in your DNA that every quarter we are reviewing it, it's fewer things to do. It's more likely to get done.
Yeah. Great point. You talked about the McDonald's ice cream machine. We went to a wedding in Palm Desert this last weekend, a niece's wedding, stopped at McDonald's on the way. And we're like, let's order ice cream cones. Okay. Sorry. It was broken.
All right. So I'm going to, just as an insider here, there is a YouTube video on why that's the case. And it's a little bit, it'll explain.
Yeah.
Go to YouTube and type in, why are McDonald's ice cream machines always broken?
I know.
And it will piss you off on why.
Yeah. It's so funny that you brought that up, because we just experienced that. All right. Well, I think we're done with this one. You ready to end this?
Let's end it.
Okay. Thanks everybody for being with us today. And remember, building a team is the way to reclaim your freedom. And we're here to help you with our course and community and our white glove service, where we find a rock star VA for you. So 3 things we'd love for you to do, and we'd really appreciate it. Number 1, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already done so, either on your iPhone or your Android phone. And then, of course, on YouTube, subscribe to us there. And then number 2 is give us a rating, preferably 5-star, or leave a comment below the video on YouTube. Anything that you put in, that'll help us get the word out more. And we'll be there and we'll answer it and appreciate that. Give you some thanks. And then the 3rd thing is go to HireMyVA.com. for more information on our course and community, our white glove service, and where you can also get our free checklist, very comprehensive checklist to learn what you need to do to properly prepare for, hire, and thrive with a virtual assistant. And remember, even without experience using our program, our course and community, you learn how to prepare for, hire, and thrive with virtual assistants. Larry, we continue to help folks. Just talking to a satisfied client the other day. And it's just rewarding to be able to help people make a change and a difference in their lives, working properly with virtual assistants. Yeah. So if you guys want that, just go to HireMyVA.com for more information.
Yeah, and it's funny how many of these clients are actually coming on board with the intention of hiring one VA, but they end up hiring 4 or 5, or in one case, 9 VAs, right? And if you're still around, if you're still hanging around to the end of this video or this recording or this podcast, thank you for doing that, because sometimes there are little nuggets that you can get here at the end. And I'm just going to share a couple of things from this awesome book called Flashpoints, and it kind of ties into what we were talking about today. Don't underestimate the intelligence of a crowd. In this case, the crowd is your team. There's a lot of intelligence on your team. If you will only ask and tap into it, please do that. And funny thing is how this kind of ties into it. Another one is, the key to success is to never stop learning. The key to failure is to think we know it all. We don't know it all. And sometimes that knowledge is just that team member standing next to you, if we would just ask.
That's right.
So with all of that said, God bless you folks. I'm glad that you're on this journey with us. So do me a favor, do yourself a favor, do the world a favor. do something significant today. God bless you. God keep you. God hold you. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.